Corn School is brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
We're at Crops-A-Palooza in Portage, La Prairie, Manitoba, joined by John Hurd, soil scientist with Manitoba Agriculture. And John, we're standing in front of this corn plot, and I believe there are 4 different nitrogen fertilization strategies or approaches, 5 if you count the check on display here. But when we look at what Manitoba corn growers or corn growers here on the eastern side of the prairies do in practice on their fields, what do we have for different combinations of nitrogen application on corn?
I'm still blushing. You called me impressed me, called me a soil scientist.
Oh, is that a wrong title?
I do the soil fertility extension.
Okay. Should I do it again?
I'm flattered by your title for me. Anyways, yes, indeed, the Manitoba Corn Growers did a study this spring, or a survey of farmers, basically to see how it is that the typical Manitoba farm groups are fertilizing corn, and really show how farmers are exploiting how corn is different than other crops. There are only, I think, 13 ways of timing and placement to fertilize that we found in the study. And so I have my our corn uptake pattern here. I see that's on screen. So what we find that about 30% of farmers in the year this survey was done typically apply fertilizer in the fall. Very common on the clay soils, and that's fall banded ammonia. So they'd be applying nitrogen way out here on this, if the chart extended. A further 30% typically apply nitrogen adder before seeding, broadcast urea predominantly. And then we had about 15 to 20% would apply nitrogen at seeding, often urea in a sideband application. And then we have about 20% that apply nitrogen in season, either side dressed anhydrous ammonia, or 28%, or what many farmers are trying and using now, or tooling up, is dribble banding. So there is no one size fits all. There's a number of options, and within that there's also different forms. One way that we've spoken here about accomplishing that split application is through simply using some controlled release fertilizers. That also accomplishes essentially a split supply of nitrogen to the crop.
You mentioned we're seeing more of that in-season application, though, as has been done in the Midwest U.S. for a while. Are we going to continue to see that trend unfold here?
Farmers have the equipment, and because they can, they will. But our research in 10 sites have not shown an advantage nor a disadvantage to splitting nitrogen in season. We might expect advantages in those years when we experience early season losses, when the plant isn't using much nitrogen, but if we have all upfront nitrogen, that nitrogen is vulnerable to loss. If we have those conditions and farmers have the option to supplement in season, that's where we might expect those systems to shine or have some possibilities. But in a normal year, we just expect that there's no yield differences. It does, however, give farmers a chance to delay making that decision on how much they're going to put on, and they can maybe react to weather conditions. Yeah. Fall nitrogen is still a very efficient way for us to handle nitrogen in our systems, and we've had a dry fall, a dry spring, and we would expect in this year any fall applied nitrogen is just as efficient as spring applied. The flip side is if we have a wet fall, a wet spring, then we can have substantial losses.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the in-crop application being done with Y drops or equivalent to that type of technology. Speed, of course, is something that we need to be thinking about, and not going too fast in corn. That can be a problem.
Well, we know those that tend to go a little fast. If those hoses are not applying to the soil, we can paint the crop with 28%, and we can see some leaf burn. My suggestion would simply be to slow down and enjoy your time in the corn crop, and put the nitrogen as close to the soil as you can.
All right. Mm-hmm. Thanks for your time. Again, John Hurd, soil scientist, but a soil fertility specialist. I think soil scientist still applies, John.
Again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.